So when I was young, I became fascinated by games of chance. And one of the key reasons for that was this particular book. It's a book called Beat the Dealer by Ed Thorpe. And contained within the book was a strategy on how you could beat the casinos at their own game. You could beat them at blackjack. It laid out the strategy, it explained it in great depth, and it was pretty simple to implement. And that became a source of inspiration for me because I thought, well, that's interesting. A game that in theory you couldn't possibly beat, somebody has proven that you can beat it. And therefore, one of my dreams became to do exactly the same thing. And remarkably, that's exactly what I achieved. So when I first started betting on sports, I wasn't betting on horse racing. And that was because I had no knowledge of it. But I did have lots of good knowledge on football. I had an instinctive mind around football matches and what the likely scores were going to be. And I thought if I back that up with some data and come up with a few ideas and some models and just refine things a little bit better, I'd probably stand a fair chance. So that's what I would do. Every week I would do loads of research on the matches that were coming up at the weekend and then place bets on it. Bear in mind, back in these days, research was Rothman's yearbook and the Racing and Football Outlook, where they would publish the fixtures and a summary of most recent form and stuff like that. And that worked pretty well. I won money on the football pools. I won money through betting on football at traditional bookmakers on the high street. But then I started to run into problems because if you win money with a bookmaker, they don't really want your business. And I became a bit disillusioned at that point because I just thought, well, if I can't get the bets on that I need, then there's really no point in me going down this avenue any further. And I drifted off into financial markets. So when people had just started trading online, that was where I sort of joined the fray, as it were. And I started to expand my knowledge of risk and risk taking and trading and all of these sort of things and investing in financial markets. And that's pretty much where I thought I would stay. However, through all of the contacts that I made there, I began to learn about a new concept during the dot-com boom called a betting exchange. And it immediately grabbed my attention. And I thought, well, I need to get involved in this and just have a play around and see what I could do. Because all of a sudden, doing something sort of special with betting was suddenly back on the table. So where I started on betting exchanges was doing a bit of Arbing, a bit of arbitrage for its full name, or you may recognize it more as matched betting nowadays. I would basically run around, look at all of the bookmaker prices, back at the best possible price with a bookmaker, and then lay it off on the Betfair betting exchange. And that would net me a risk-free profit between those two bets. However, it wasn't as risk-free as you would first think, because one day I backed something at 125 with a bookmaker, laid it off on the exchange, and the bookmaker refused to pay out. So I had a huge liability on the exchange. And I did eventually get some money out of this particular bookmaker, but it suddenly woke me up to the fact that there was a lot of risk with doing this particular type of bet. So I had to come up with some better idea and something else that would be a lot less risky. And one morning I woke up and I went onto the exchange and I backed at a certain price. I laid at a lower price and I just sat there and waited for those orders to get matched. And miraculously, when those two orders got matched, I had a profit. And I was thinking, wow, all of a sudden, I've got this entire market here and I can actually put these types of bets into the market and I don't have to have any third-party counter risk. I can just basically go onto the exchange, put two different prices into the market, lay at a lower price than I back at, and as long as they get matched, I will make money. It just exploded my brain. And that was the start of this particular part of my journey. So when I started on racing, it was just total gobbledygook. I was watch the TV, wouldn't make any sense. I'd pick up the Racing Post, make even less sense. And racing isn't very friendly to people who are just entering the sport. It just didn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And I thought, well, I know what I'll do. I'll just do what I've been doing in other markets. I'll just back at this price, lay at a lower price and wait for the two to get matched. But what happened was the price would fly all over the place. And I just thought, well, I can't make any sense of this whatsoever. And it turned out that racing was very different from a sporting perspective than other types of markets. And that was because people wouldn't put their money down until much, much later. And they wanted to see the horse. They wanted to see how it's behaving in the preliminaries. There may be something that happened in a previous race that would influence the next race. The weather may change. There were lots of different characteristics within the market that made the odds move around all over the place. But I thought, well, I recognize this market because having worked in financial markets, I figured out that in fact what I could do was just trade a horse racing market like I would trade the stock market. I'd buy at one price, sell at the other, and all I needed to do was begin to anticipate exactly how the price was likely to move, or not, as the case may be. You could trade it either way. And so that was my general approach on racing. I suddenly figured out that what was actually happening was that there were reasonably predictable patterns within the market that reflected the underlying sentiment that was being shown on course. Now, there's a really important thing to talk about here, because when you're actively trading, you're winning, sometimes you're losing others, and so on. And when you're betting, it's completely fundamentally different. When you're betting, you may put a tenner down to win 100. When you're trading, you may put down 100 to win a tenner. But as long as you've got all of that risk balanced out and you're doing things correctly, then there's no problem with that. But a lot of people really freak out with this, because sometimes trades go wrong, and it's all about this, what happens at the end of the day, not on any individual trade. You're going to at times have to take a loss because you got it wrong, or the market just did something really weird. But sometimes that goes in your favor as well. So it's about getting the balance of those right and tipping it slightly in your favor. You may win a bit, you may lose a bit, you win some more, then you lose a little bit of that. And then at the end of the day, it's the average result that you're getting over a period of time that fundamentally matters. But the problem is this level of uncertainty is what freaks people out a lot about trading, and what a lot of people really struggle with. People love to win. People struggle to take a loss when they necessarily need to, or they take a profit too quickly when there's potentially more there. And this is something that sort of plays with your mind, which is why some people find trading a little bit harder than others. But my general approach is basically try and do the best that I can within any market. When I need to hedge my position, I'll take the profit or loss at that particular moment in time, and then I forget about it and I move on to the next opportunity. And I'm more focused on doing that over a sequence of trades and then seeing where I end up on average at the end of the day, the week, the month, or the year. So I started to work seriously hard on trying to understand racing markets and what influenced the odds and why the odds moved in a certain way. Some things were obvious, other things were not so obvious. But for example, you would look at a handicap race, and typically that would trade within a particular traded range, which meant I could trade in and out multiple times before the start of the race and make money that way. And the reason that would happen is because there was so much uncertainty across the entire race, and that was because it was a handicap. When we look at something like a maiden race, and if you have horses in there that have absolutely no form whatsoever, then typically the market's going to be driven by emotion and opinion. And as a consequence, the market will trend. It will either get heavily backed or get heavily laid, and the price will begin to move around. So you would sit on the back of that trend or catch it when it heads off in the other direction, when it's been overdone, and all those sort of things. You would begin to identify certain types of strategies within certain markets. But sometimes it was much more obvious than that. If the horse was messing around in the parade ring, then necessarily you could see that, and the price on that particular horse would drift because people would no longer want to back it if it didn't look like it was enjoying itself. And as the horses went to post, if the jockey didn't have control of the horse, then that was necessarily a negative as well. Then you began to pick up on all of these little traits. And again, I should reiterate, all I'm trying to do here is just anticipate some of those things. Not do things at random, get myself on the correct edge of the market. That was all I was looking to do, and those are the sort of tactics and things that I would use in order to do that. So as time went on and I got more familiar with the way the markets worked, I began to push the boundaries of what was possible. I'll never forget the first day that I earned £100, and then all of a sudden I was thinking, I wonder if I could earn £100 a race, and then maybe I could earn £1,000 a week, and what about £1,000 a race? And I started to really push the boundaries of really what was possible. And then all of a sudden I began to dream about what it would take to get to £1 million. And I figured out that my average trade value was about £25 per trade. So that includes the thousands, it includes the minus 100 where I've really messed things up. It's a whole mixture of different things that all just happened to average out to £25. So I figured out that if I could trade 40,000 markets, that would get me to my £1 million. So all of a sudden I had the bit between my teeth. I knew what I needed to do to get to £1 million. If I could trade markets with an average profit of about £25, it would take me about 40,000 markets to get there. So I just knuckled down and did the best that I possibly could. And in the end, it took me about 47,000 markets to get to that magic million, an average of about £21.50 or so per event that I traded. And it was funny reaching that number because I wrote to Betfair, got a spreadsheet back that confirmed exactly what I'd done. And I was expecting the next thing to happen would be a phone call from the CEO going, congratulations, well done. The Racing Post running headline, man who knows nothing about horse racing makes $1 million, and all of these things. And do you want to know what actually happened when I crossed that amazing threshold? Absolutely nothing. I went to Tesco's, nobody patted me on the back, nobody knew or had a clue what was going on, and I just thought, oh, is that it? I've pushed so hard for so long to get to this number, and it's actually really disappointing and underwhelming at this particular moment in time. So what I actually did after that was I sort of thought, oh, is that it? What do I do now? So all I did was, well, just carry on basically, because this all happened towards the start of my career. And back then, you could say you couldn't do that nowadays, but think about it. Back then, there was no software, there was no advice, there was nobody trading. None of that sort of stuff existed. And now there's probably too much advice from people who are trying to exploit that opportunity rather than actually trade it itself. But the software's improved dramatically. I can now trade 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I can trade many, many more markets. And if I really pushed it, I could probably do 47,000 markets in a year if I really wanted to. So yeah, positive minds find opportunities, negative ones problems. The markets have changed individually. Some strategies that work no longer work, but there are new strategies that have come out of it. And of course, what you can do now has been vastly expanded over the course of a number of years. So yeah, if you're interested in doing this sort of thing, it is still possible. It may not be suitable for you, but also make sure that you understand exactly what your true objective is. And that isn't to win consistently. It isn't to avoid a loss desperately. If you do roughly the right things over a long period of time, over a large number of markets, there's no reason why you couldn't achieve something special too.